I think we're going to start very soon, so if you guys could all take a seat, that would be phenomenal. Everyone, please take a seat. Test, test. All right. Can people hear me? Okay, cool. I'm going to go turn the lights off.
So good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. For those online, thanks for tuning in. Tonight we're in for a treat. We have Tom from Clay and also Aliisa Rosenthal from OpenAI, who will be talking to us about the go-to-market revolution that OpenAI has had and continues to have. I'm from the MIT Club of Northern California. I'm the tech track lead there, and it's a voluntary-run organization. And what we do is we put on events like these, panel discussions, talks, hackathons, and we will be hosting some meetups in the near future. So please join us whenever you can. We're open to everyone, and there's different pricing if you're an alumni. And actually, this, I believe, is the first collaboration with the Harvard Club of San Francisco. So I'm really happy about that collaboration. We'll be doing more of that. So please do join us in the future and enjoy this evening. Tom.
Thank you, Ida. Please, everyone, give a round of applause to Ida. Thank you very much, Ida. Okay. Thank you, Ida, for the introduction. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Tom Nakata. I'm one of the co-hosts of the event today. And before we jump into the exciting panel, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself and the company and what we do to introduce our exciting product. Sorry, the first technical malfunction of the day. Give me just 1 second. Okay, it's fixed. Sorry about that. So I'm one of the co-hosts today, and the startup that I co-founded and is the CEO of is a company called Clay. And what we do, before I talk about that, so I went to Harvard for undergrad, but my co-founder, Toku, who is doing the technical things over there, is an MIT, went to MIT for undergrad, and that's why we were able to realize this collaboration between the two college alumni clubs. Wanted to quickly introduce what we do at the startup Clay. We are the AI proctor to catch any sort of AI cheating that normally takes place in an online environment, like online interviews and online tests. I'm sure most of you are aware of what's taking place in the AI cheating universe. People are using AI to generate answers during online tests and online interviews and all sorts of things. So we're trying to be the proctoring layer that maintains the integrity of remote interviews and tests. I just want to play a very quick video of how our AI proctor for cheating detection works. So what we do basically is whenever you have an interview or an online test, you would input that URL. It could be like a Zoom URL or a Google Meet URL, and then we would create a new URL for the candidate to log into. And it would activate a mobile app that essentially becomes the AI proctor that can monitor the interview or the test from a secondary angle. The candidate would put the mobile app to the side like this, so we can get a side angle of the interview or the test and be able to so it works like if you're the interviewer, you get to see what the interview looks like from the side, so you can see if they're using any AI tool during the interview or any sort of cheating tool during an online test. That's basically it. If you're interested in what we do as an AI proctor, I'll be around. Also, my co-founder will be around later, so please come talk to us. We'd love to get connected. Okay, that's it from myself. No more advertisements. Without further ado, would love to invite our guest, Aliisa Rosenthal. Please, everybody, please give a round of applause to Aliisa. Thank you. Awesome. Is it on?
Testing, testing.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Aliisa, for joining us today. I'm sure you're very busy, but we really appreciate it that you took the time to come join us. I think most of the guests already know who you are and what you do, but would love to hear how you introduce yourself. If you could do that quickly.
Sure, yeah. I've been in tech sales for about 20 years, and most recently was head of sales at OpenAI. I joined when we were about, I don't know, 10 people on the go-to-market side, and helped us scale to hundreds, and was there for about 3 years, and left a few months ago.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aliisa. I did a little bit of research, obviously, before this, and you joined OpenAI before ChatGPT, before DALL-E, before a lot of things, when they had was an API and small team. The sales team was like 2 people, I think. So I guess we'd love to hear why you decided to join like a startup at that stage, right? If you could walk us through that experience.
Sure. You know, it's funny. When I got my offer to join OpenAI, I called all the smartest people I knew, all my friends in VC covering AI, and I said, "Hey, I got this offer to join OpenAI. Should I take it?" And every single one of them said no. So don't get career advice from VCs is my is my takeaway. So it was not an obvious choice at all. This was, you know, obviously before ChatGPT, and really OpenAI at that point was still a research lab. We had an API. We had, GPT-3, 3.5 came out right as I joined. But it wasn't really in any sort of business applications or commercial uses yet. Not much of a sales motion. We had a few $1 million from companies like Jasper and Writer, some sort of, sort of the AI writing wrappers. And so it was almost everyone I talked to said that was a strange step from me. I was running a sales team at a publicly traded company before. I think, what really got me is honestly sitting with product managers. I mean, one of the PMs invited me over to his house with a bunch of the other PMs, and they opened their laptop and just showed me DALL-E. And there was something very visceral about DALL-E, seeing an image created from words. We're so used to this now. It's amazing how adaptable humans are. This doesn't feel like magic anymore, but it was pure magic in early 2022. And I remember thinking, I don't know what the commercial application of this is, but there's got to be some money here. And then the other moment for me was meeting Sam Altman. He interviewed me. I remember it was my birthday, and that guy's pretty convincing, it turns out. And he was candid. He's like, "Look, I don't know what sales will look like here. I don't really even know if we'll ever have an enterprise sales team. You maybe will go sell our products via Microsoft, or maybe we'll only have consumer we haven't figured this out. But if you're willing to take a shot with us, we'll take a shot with you." And I just thought, I know that guy seems pretty compelling. So yeah, joined in early 2022, and was quite a ride from there.
Awesome. You said you didn't really, or I guess he said that he didn't really know what sales could even look like, but what did it end up looking like? The sales motion, like who are you selling it to? How are you doing it? Things like that in the very early stage.
Yeah, in the early days, we just had an API, and it was very sort of PLGs. Developers would find our API. They would just self-serve, swipe a credit card, and then they'd reach out to us for either, an NDA, an enterprise agreement, some technical support, some better pricing, rate limits. Oh my God, so many questions about rate limits. Everyone was getting slowed down, and latency was a big concern. So, at the time, we were mostly just kind of glorified tech support, honestly. I introduced a committed consumption model. So just basically a lever for us to say, okay, if you commit to a certain consumption threshold, we started at 25K. We'll give you support. We'll give you an enterprise agreement. We'll get you into our beta testing. We'll raise your rate limits. And then built a program from there, so 50K, 100K. And that worked really pretty well until ChatGPT launched, and then that broke everything. But eventually, we also released an enterprise version of ChatGPT, which took a lot of playing around to get that pricing model right. It was interesting trying to move from consumption to seat-based pricing. Eventually, we landed on a seat-based plus consumption model for the enterprise product. So it was a long journey. I can tell a lot of stories along the way, but we tinkered with a lot of different pricing models and go-to-market motions.
And then you said once ChatGPT launched, it kind of changed everything. And I'm sure when it came out, like things are just night and day. I'm assuming, and you're getting tons of inbounds from there. Was it just kind of just eye opening, like the first day ChatGPT launched?
Yeah, I mean, the entire thing was so weird because, no one had heard of us. I'd be selling to tinkerers, it was a lot of startups. Sometimes we were in the, sort of experimentation lab of a bigger company, but no one was really taking AI seriously. No one was putting our models into real production use cases at big companies. And my sales flow was like, let me teach you what generative AI is. Let me teach you about embeddings. Let me teach you about LLMs. And then ChatGPT launched, which, by the way, I saved the Slack. It was so funny. I got a Slack from Mira the night before saying, FYI, we're launching this thing, chat with GPT 3.5. It shouldn't have packed your team, just letting you know. And then after we launched it, you could tell pretty quickly something was up. Like, something just happened, It was like everyone I had ever met, basically, over the next month just started reaching out to me. LinkedIn, text messages, email, phone calls, voice. I mean, my LinkedIn connection request went up to like something like 10,000. I was like, I don't even know how to manage this. And we were just hit through every possible medium. Everyone suddenly in the entire world wanted to talk to us. We had 5 salespeople. And just none of the systems and processes and lead scoring, and we just didn't have any of the tooling in place to manage that inbound volume. And then the entire sales cycle changed. I'd get in the room to give my talk on LLMs and embeddings, and I'd be like, yeah, we already know all this. It was like everyone became an expert on AI overnight, which was very weird and very confusing. And so it went from, okay, let me teach you about AI to let me tell you how AI can bring value to your organization, which was a very big change in our entire sales flow and how we pitched the product, how we talked about AI. We had to grow up very quickly. And then the other thing was, I talked before about how, it sort of broke our pricing model. We had the model before where people would come and they would tinker with the API, and then when they hit certain thresholds, they'd ask for a higher plan, and it sort of made sense. And there was some, good indicators that a customer would be a good enterprise client. After ChatGPT launched, it seemed like pretty much every company in the world just wanted to sign an agreement with us so they could put out a press release that says, X company partners with OpenAI, which is not a good, healthy sales motion. It's like you're basically selling vaporware. Clients will say, I'll just sign a 100K contract with you, but have no intention of actually implementing your product or using it, which we realized pretty quickly was going to put us in a tough place in a year. Like, all those customers would just churn. And so I actually had some kind of hostile conversations, with companies being like, just send me a contract already. And I was like, well, tell me how you plan to use our API and how you're going to spend this $100,000. And I remember one, Fortune 500 company got so mad at me, he went to Sam Altman and complained. And I was like, I can sign this customer, they're not going to use our API, and in a year they're going to churn, and this doesn't feel like a good sales motion. So it was a very unusual moment, having to basically almost have our customers convince us that they should use our product. That moment didn't last very long. That was only for a few months. But it was a very strange, I don't know if any other salesperson has ever had that sort of experience of, are you sure you want to buy this? Are there other ways that, what are you really looking for? If you're looking for a partnership or an announcement or PR, maybe there's a better way for us to get there than just for you buying software you don't intend to use. So anyway, everything changed pretty much overnight when ChatGPT launched.
That makes sense. So obviously that doesn't really happen often in any product ever.
I would not expect that, no. No,
Right.
I've never seen that before.
Did you, I guess from our perspective, ChatGPT, when it came out, it kind of sold itself and everybody wanted to use it, or at least be seen as like they're using it. And that phase, I guess, lasted for a couple of months. Did you ever experience a phase where you're running into a roadblock and you're not able to actually sell it? Did any sort of a hurdle ever occur?
I mean, the most frustrating thing was we launched a consumer product, and then every company on earth said, hey, can I get this in my organization?
That makes
Can we get on an invoice? Do you have SSO? Do you have an enterprise agreement? And I have to say, no, we don't have any of these things. Because we sort of accidentally launched this product that became so popular. We didn't do any thinking in advance of, well, how are we going to treat organizations who want to use this? And so I get all these CIOs calling me and saying, I've got 1,000 people in my company using ChatGPT. My option are either block ChatGPT or you give me some sort of enterprise compliant version. And I didn't have an enterprise compliant version. All I had was our API. I said we could build your own. So that was a very frustrating 9 months about it took us from when the consumer version launched until I finally convinced Mira and some others at OpenAI to build an enterprise version. So that was the first kind of challenging moment. And then once we launched ChatGPT Enterprise, because it took us so long, it took us 9 months, Microsoft Copilot was already everywhere. They have 65,000 sellers. Every enterprise on earth has a relationship with Microsoft. So it was kind of weird. We finally launched this enterprise product and we go out in the world to sell it and everybody says, well, I'm already using Copilot. And so it became a very competitive sale very quickly, which was surprising.
Huh. That's actually really interesting. I just kind of assumed that you wouldn't really see Copilot as like a real competitor. But I guess because they have a lot of sellers.
Yeah, and it was a hard pitch because, they're using our models.
Yeah, that's also fair.
Everyone already has an enterprise relationship with them. And, their pitch was we embed into all of your existing Microsoft Office tooling into Teams and Outlook and Excel. And that was actually a really hard pitch to go up against when we're like, oh, we live alone in this standalone application. We don't know anything about you or your users. And, you've never signed an agreement with us. And we're kind of a new company that you're not sure you trust. So it was a surprisingly hard sale. And everyone's like, you work at OpenAI. Did you really sell anything? It was actually a surprisingly challenging sale in building up that enterprise muscle.
That makes sense. Thanks for sharing your experience. Now would love to hear a little bit about your perspective a little bit on enterprise AI integration. Obviously a very hot topic, has been since the day ChatGPT launched and still is today because it's obviously a very hard thing to do. And it's been a hot topic of like, oh, is it working? Is it not working? Do people want to do it? Do people not want to do it? Do you have a perspective on what people should care, senior executives at enterprise should care about? Like maybe they should do this first, or what's your take on AI integration for a large company?
Yeah, we're kind of in this hard moment, and we've been in this hard moment for a couple of years now, where I think most enterprise leaders want to use AI. They feel a lot of pressure to deploy AI, but they also feel like they need to do it in this very bespoke way. Every enterprise is like, well, it needs to be trained on my data and it needs to be compliant with my company's guidelines and it has to work with our very specific processes. And the challenge is it's like every company is reinventing the wheel right now. And the reality is it's really hard to do that. Building an AI application is not easy. You need a UI, you need to understand all the different models, you need evaluation frameworks, you need compliance APIs, you need to tie in your internal data sources, either through some sort of third-party embeddings tool or indexing tool. It gets pretty complex pretty quickly. And then don't even get me started on fine-tuning and how hard that is. But so I think we have this challenge right now where companies are trying to build it all themselves in-house, and it's really difficult, versus just going out and using applications off the shelf that are ready-made. And I don't know how this will play out, but I am much more bullish on ready-made applications. I think they're just much more deployable. Look at OpenAI. We really, really struggled to get access to our products and to democratize access to get distribution. And then we launched this really easy user interface that was, had no barriers to entry, and it just took off. So every time I talk to a business leader, it's funny, we were saying I was actually at Brown University this weekend trying to convince them to use my alma mater, trying to convince them to use AI. And, a lot of them just kept asking me, but like, how? And I'm like, just download it, give me your phone. Let me down. I was talking to the head of the medical program, the med school and the health system. And I'm like, have you ever heard of open evidence? He was like, no. I was like, let me put it on your phone right now and just try it, and his mind was blown. And so a lot of this, it sounds trite, but just find applications with low barriers to entry and just start using them and deploying them and telling your employees it's okay to use those tools. There's like the cultural element, like this person at the top endorsing it and saying this is okay. One funny story I like to tell actually is when I joined OpenAI, the first time I ever did a performance review, there was a note at the top. This was, before ChatGPT that said, no use of LLMs in your performance reviews. And I was like, damn it. And then fast forward a year later, I'm doing performance reviews again, and at the top it said, use of LLMs encouraged. And it was a cultural change. It's sort of meta, but even within OpenAI, we had to go through that our own cultural change of it is okay to use AI in your day-to-day job. So it's sort of twofold. One is the leaders at the top of these organizations saying this is okay, encouraging it, rewarding it, recognizing it. And then the second thing is not feeling like you have to build your own custom bespoke AI applications, that you can use things that are off the shelf and be successful with them.
I just want to make sure everyone got that. I think that was like a great insight. So I just want to summarize and make sure I understood it correctly. You basically said if you care about enterprise AI integration, try an app, and then build a culture that basically says you can try an app.
Bingo.
Awesome.
Nice and succinct.
Because I feel like whenever people say AI integration, they're always like, fine-tune an AI model that can learn this company's data. And
Can
then
I rant on fine-tuning for just a second? So the thing with fine-tuning, that you're actually doing is you are changing the weights of the model. And you need hundreds or millions of sample sets and any sort of reinforcement learning to actually indicate real signal that impacts the model. The odds that you get good data, you have enough of it, and you can actually make the model perform better is so vanishingly low. Like, we struggle at OpenAI internally to do that for our customers. So I'm like always discouraging people to try to go down that route. It is so hard to do it well.
So the app layer is just
the app
suggested.
layer.
That makes sense. Well, then almost always the second question is, but if I make an AI, wouldn't I get eaten by OpenAI or other AI companies that can? Well, because I think it was like a year or two ago when OpenAI came up with like an AI app store type of thing, and it just sent shivers down everyone's spine. Most startup founders building an app. So, from the startup's perspective, they all think, if I make an app, OpenAI is going to eat me. But from an OpenAI's perspective, your perspective, you're saying, we'll make an app. So why do you think there's this difference in thought?
Yeah, so if you look at the foundational model labs, you've got OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, maybe Meta, maybe xAI. Most of these companies are largely consumer. Anthropic is the one that's going, really hard in enterprise, but they have a very, very specific lean, right? They are going coding. So kind of take Anthropic aside and look at the other labs like OpenAI and Google are probably, I think, the ones to pay the most attention to. And they are both at heart consumer companies. Now, being inside this company, there are so many competing priorities. Like, it's hard to almost overstate the fact that OpenAI is trying to do 10,000 things at the same time and pulled in every single direction. Having run the enterprise team, it is so hard to get anyone to care about enterprise because it's just a tiny, tiny sliver of OpenAI's business, which is largely consumer. So yes, could OpenAI decide they're going to go build some obscure app for, dental office front end? Sure, they could. The likelihood they do that seems extremely low to me. Now, there are some exceptions. The lower hanging the fruit, the riskier it is. For example, I think anything that basically recreates ChatGPT, but for a specialized field, like, chat for healthcare professionals, that is a little risky to me because it's not very hard for OpenAI to do something like that. But anything that requires a whole new user interface, whole new infrastructure, it just feels like that is a really big lift. And like you see what's happening at OpenAI right now, they're basically saying code red, just pay attention to ChatGPT, just pay attention to our core competency and stop the 10,000 other projects we're doing right now. I think that ultimately is going to be a big challenge for OpenAI and for Google too. Google at heart is not an enterprise company. Google is mostly a consumer product. And maybe they're going to go build some really amazing tooling in Google Workspace, but maybe not, because that's not really their cash cow and what they pay the most attention to. So, it's certainly always a threat, but I think in the scheme of things, anyone building enterprise applications, it's unlikely that I think that your product gets, accidentally consumed by one of the frontier labs.
Awesome. Thank you. Would love to shift gears a little bit from talking about AI to a little bit about sales and go-to-market and things like that. Before OpenAI, Aliisa worked at Alchemy, and she grew the revenue from roughly 50 million to 200 million ARR and through IPO before joining OpenAI. So that was like a classic SaaS type of sales. So would love to hear a little bit about like how much of the SaaS sales transferred to, I guess, early days OpenAI, and after ChatGPT, it just blew up and became like a whole another thing. How much of the past experience in sales were you able to transfer it, and how much of it was just completely new? And I guess what we all kind of want to learn from this is, how much information about sales that we can find on the internet is applicable to like modern day sales now that there's so much AI in everything.
Yeah, 200 million ARR used to be a lot of ARR.
Yes.
That used to be impressive. We went
Still
public
is.
with that ARR. I don't think the craft of sales has changed that dramatically in the last few years. You still need to run a sales cycle in the same way. You still need to do excellent discovery. You need to, demo a product in the way that ties back to value of your buyer. You need to negotiate the same way you've always negotiated. There are just some nuances, I think, in how selling an AI product is different from selling a SaaS product. The biggest one is margin. Everyone, especially buyers, got used to software companies having 90% margins. So they got really used to, especially in the negotiation piece, expecting 40% discounts and more. And it's just, we almost had to be really upfront with our buyers. Like, we don't have 40% discount to give. This is a different world. We would say this is more like buying hardware, honestly, because you're buying compute at the end of the day. And having to sort of train our buyer around that, which they weren't happy about. And we had two choices, right? We could either inflate our prices so we could give 40% discounts, or we could just try to, reset their expectations. And we mostly did the latter, but it was really tricky. The other thing that sort of margin impacts is that the software, or if you can call it software, the product you're selling is expensive. Like compute is expensive. And so we found buyers were much more cognizant of potentially buying shelfware, buying tooling that no one used. And they were much more concerned about that than I've seen. And I've sold a lot of seat-based software. And people care a little bit, but they care a lot when the price is, $100 a month versus $10 a month. So we played around a lot with the pricing model of ChatGPT. And eventually where we landed was a very low per user cost that had some basic consumption built into it, and then overages. So the more you consume, the more you pay. And I was really nervous about this because I thought buyers would have a tough time understanding it and navigating it. But they didn't. They really acclimated very quickly to it, and they really preferred it because they said, this way I can buy it for my entire company. And if you're not really using it, I'm only wasting $10 a month. And if you are using it, I am happy to pay for your usage. Because if you're getting value out of it, if you're engaged with it, then I want you to use it. So it took us a long time to land there, but it was a very different model from previous software companies where I had sold, where it was just usually per seat licensing, and people cared about usage, but they weren't as neurotic about it. Because the cost of compute is so high, there's much more concern that the tools are getting used.
I should know this, but has that pricing model just become like the industry standard? I mean, I think the AI product in general are still kind of figuring out what the best pricing model is, but would you say you guys kind of came up with that pricing model and that is kind of de facto pricing model?
I don't know if there really is a de facto pricing
That's
model yet.
fair.
You hear a lot of like outcome-based pricing,
Yeah.
which I think Sierra came up with, and that's gotten really popular. We tried so many different pricing models at OpenAI.
So interesting.
And And it's funny, like the $20 a month, ChatGPT Plus tier, we frankly did not put that much thought into that. We were kind of like, $20 seems like a good price. And then little did we know we would like set basically the groundwork for every future AI product. Now there's a lot of rigor around it, but you're kind of stuck at $20 because that's where we that's where we started and that's where we're stuck. I think there's still a lot of debate here. I don't know if we've totally solved what the pricing model is. I'm a little skeptical personally of outcome-based pricing, but I see why it works in a world where you have hourly billing. Like, consultants and lawyers, it's going to feel strange to continue to have hourly billing when you could, use AI to get the work done very quickly, and you should incentivize that. So that's where outcome-based pricing makes a lot of sense. I think we're still figuring out on the application layer what is the right pricing model. To me, a blend of a per-user and consumption-based approach makes a lot of sense, but we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, this is a really hard question. Thank you. This is my favorite question of the day. So I listened to a lot of podcasts that you've done, past interviews, I read them. And you mentioned that a part of sales team's job is to gather feedback from use cases that influenced R&D roadmap based on things like consumption yield, feasibility of, I guess, the product development, and also the ROI of, if you actually make this product, it can make the customer's lives better. So I guess, sorry, I kind of phrased that in an awkward way, but I read Aliisa's interview, and at a certain point you said sales should also get customer feedback and impact the development process of the product. What's like a good example of OpenAI's case where you saw some of the customers using it in a specific way or got their feedback and went to the dev team and said, this is what maybe we should be building, or we should do these things differently?
Oh man, there's so many examples of this. I think one of my favorites is when we launched ChatGPT Enterprise. So my kind of one thing I did while we were sort of putting the product together was run around and just get a bunch of beta customers. And I reached out to like 50 different companies that I had worked with and said, you guys want to try this product and give us feedback? And a lot of them said yes. And one of them said yes very eagerly and then signed a contract before I even like totally had the pricing figured out. Like they were just so eager. And that was Carlyle, which is not exactly, it's a private equity fund. It is not known, I think, for being like the most cutting edge, high tech company. And so I was like, guys, what are you doing? Like, how are you using this product? And they said, why don't we come out to SF and show you? And so they came out to our office down in the Mission, and got my sales team together, and they got up and gave us a presentation, and they blew our minds. So we had this tool, you guys probably don't even remember this, it was called Code Interpreter, which was Greg Brockman named it. It's not like the most intuitive name for it. Like, no, I don't think people really understood what it did. But Carlyle found this tool that was like buried in ChatGPT and realized essentially it's running Python under the hood. And they realized you could use it to perform calculations. So they had like Black-Scholes analysis. They were doing all their deal diligence. They were doing extraordinarily complex financial engineering in ChatGPT. And now maybe you're like, okay, yeah, duh. But like in 2023, that blew our minds. We didn't know that was in the realm of possibility. It was kind of common knowledge that the models can do math. We're like, oh, if you use Python, you can do math. And so we went back and we told our research team about this, and they spent a bunch of time basically post-training the Code Interpreter, which was an endpoint, API endpoint, and rebranded it as data analysis and made it much better with analyzing and visualizing data. And that honestly became our moneymaker with ChatGPT. Like that was our tool we went and showed in demos on the sales team, and people fell out of their chairs. And no one else had anything like it. And we learned, Carlyle taught us about it. Like our customer showed us, and it was just from like, hey, like asking our customers, our very eager customers, what are you doing? And then taking that feedback, giving it to research and product, and delivering a much better product experience for us of our customers.
Super interesting. And I do want to clarify, is this after the ChatGPT launch?
Yeah, so this is, and I could give you pre-ChatGPT examples too, but yeah, this one in particular was when we were launching the enterprise version of ChatGPT. Summer 2023.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess the ChatGPT launch gave you guys a lot of exposure and gave a lot of the companies exposure to using this model, and they were just using it in their different ways, and they just started kind of going at it.
Yeah, I mean, another example from earlier days when we still didn't have any customers and no one knew about us was we created this ASR model called Whisper,
Yeah.
transcription model. And we didn't really know much about, the researchers building this, who were extraordinary. But, they're like, how are people going to use this thing? Can you go talk to customers and ask? And so I went and, interviewed a bunch of people who just found, basically people were finding this model. And then I was reaching out to them to say, can I interview you about your use and then ask you what you need? And this sounds so obvious, but they're like, you have no speaker identification in your model. So I just get this raw chunk of text and I have no idea who's talking. And there were so many examples like this. Then we went back to the research team and said we need speaker identification and these other like 3 or 4 really critical things that the model's going to have to be able to perform if this is ever going to be in a commercial use. And they ended up implementing that.
That makes sense. But I guess there are other patterns where you guys kind of have your own hypothesis of, I think, this is going to be like a hit thing without doing a lot of user interviews. Is there any example like that, or is it mainly from
I mean, I can
user
talk
feedback?
about things we thought were going to be hits that failed. You referenced the GPT store. That was actually, I mean,
yeah.
that was our second attempt. So we had our third attempt with the app store. We have tried 3 times
I did not know that.
to build an app
Oh my
store,
God.
and it turns out it's really, really hard. The first one we did was called plugins. And we thought that was going to be huge. And I went around calling all these companies, getting them to build
That's awesome.
plugins. And it just totally never got any traction. And then we did the same thing with the GPT store about a year later. And then we did an app store. And that has been a tough one to get off the ground. So we've had plenty of duds as well.
Okay, so even OpenAI can't really tell if things are
yeah.
going to really
You
work
don't
out.
always know.
Oh,
No.
wow. Wow. Okay, that is a big learning
Even
for everyone.
OpenAI.
We'd love to hear a little bit about hiring as well. I think, I mean, I'm not trying to create a narrative that, okay, hiring is very different in the age of AI as well, but is there anything that you care about when you're hiring people now that you are aware that a lot of things can be done by AI?
You know what's really interesting is over my 3 years at OpenAI, like as I hired people in the beginning, I focused just on their craft. So let's say I'm hiring a sales engineer. I just want to understand how good of a sales engineer you are and customer problems you've solved. And then over the course of my time at OpenAI, I started to ask a lot more about how are you using AI to excel at your craft. And I actually think this is a really big advantage for anyone entering the workforce now. Anyone earlier in their career is much more likely to start using AI tools and adopting them, which I think makes them much better at their job. So I think employers are just going to pay a lot more attention to, are you using AI? How are you using it? And I think that's going to be a big differentiator. And I certainly started to change my interview to focus on that as well.
Oh, what kind of questions would that be? Is this like a live demo thing, or?
No, just in my interview process, I would say, what AI tools do you use and how and why? And sometimes we'd have take-home assignments. So I'd say,
Okay.
use an AI tool to complete this exercise and tell me which AI tool you used.
Wow. I would probably panic. Okay. A little bit on, I guess, 3 to 5 years. I guess before we do that, sorry. I guess before we talk about the future, like present day things, as like a sales leader, is there anything that has changed completely now that people are, or now that people have a lot of access to AI? Should salespeople, behave differently? Should their day-to-day work be different from what it used to be? What's your take on sales today?
I don't think we've changed a lot yet, other than, again, just I care a lot about my team being AI enabled. Like, you should be using all of the tools available to you, and if you're not going to be as productive as you should be. I do think, and this you said not to talk about the future, but I kind of feel like where this is heading is sort of the BDR aspect, the cold outbounding, sending emails. I I think that part is going to get more and more automated fairly quickly. And then I think that sort of moves up the stack. So like inside sales, that is mostly fairly transactional, showing demos, PLG, just getting customers on contracts. Like a lot of that probably starts to get automated. I do think the hardest part to automate, and maybe like the safest place to be in sales, is kind of traditional enterprise sales. I just think humans will always value authenticity and trust and looking somebody in the eye and making a bet on them and their product. And I do think the higher the price tag of what you're selling, the more complex the sale, I think the more difficult it's going to be to automate any of that. So, I whenever people ask me this in sales, or like, what's safe? I'm like, I think the higher up the stack you go, just in terms of more strategic sales, more complex sales, and sort of less product led and technically oriented sales, the safer you are. I just can't imagine a world where a company signs $1 million contract without interacting with a human. That just seems extremely far-fetched to me.
I have a couple follow-up questions to that. And follow-up question number one is, since language models have been very accessible, and in the context of sales, and also in the context of email marketing, you said that a lot of those things can be automated, and because it can get automated, people's inboxes are getting flooded with like AI-generated sales emails. So how does that change how people react to sales now? Because I guess that email marketing used to work, but now I guess it's slowly starting to not work.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's going to get harder. It's basically impossible right now to have somebody read your email and call you. You have to send an insane amount of emails to actually get a response. And I agree with you. I think it's going to get harder and harder. I mean, right now, basically, there's 3 levers to increase your top of funnel. You either build a big outbounding team and do what we're talking about. You cold call, you send LinkedIn messages, you send emails. You do marketing. And on the company I worked at, WalkMe, before OpenAI, we just spent a ton on LinkedIn ads. It works. You do like very customized targeting of your user base, and you find them, and that works. And the third is PLG, where you just have a great product that has some sort of virality element to it. So people share, the Figma approach. Or maybe, a company I worked out early in my current mix panel, we did this clever little thing where we had a badge that you put in your footer. You got a bunch of free API calls, and then that badge went all over the internet, and that generated a lot of, inbound leads for us. So those are kind of the 3 levers right now. And whenever I talk to founders, I'm like, you need to sort of pick which one of these you want to go after. So, I mean, the pro of automated outbound is it's going to get a lot cheaper. But the con, as you said, is everyone's going to get a lot more inundated. So you have to get more and more creative on how to reach your ideal customer.
How do you define creative in that context? Like, have you seen any like good examples of good sales in the age of AI recently?
I always go back to the in-person stuff, which I know, and this is the stuff you can't automate, but like my favorite trick is like, hey, I'm going to be in your neighborhood. Want to grab a coffee? And maybe they're halfway across the country, and if they say yes, you jump on a plane. I swear that works every time. And then the other thing are dinners and like getting people together in person. That stuff works so well. This is the stuff you can't automate, and I think the stuff that converts the highest.
Dinners. I've been invited to a lot of Topgolfs. That's another one, and I always thought those were kind of goofy, but according to the head of sales at OpenAI,
and the other thing that works is going to conferences. It's like just having a booth, like that stuff, and that stuff will continue to work because people still like interacting with humans.
That's fair. The other follow-up question that I had was about human-to-human connection would always last, because if the seller is AI, there's no human connection there. What about the other side of things where the buyer is the AI? I've met a lot of startups who are trying to AI automate like the comparison process of different vendors, like the buyer process. Do you have any take on that side of sales?
I think for lower ticket sales, I think that's viable.
That's
I mean, again, I don't think anyone's going to make $1 million purchase without shaking someone's hand. But I do think on lower ACV purchases, if you're talking like a $5,000 product, I could see an autonomous system running that process and maybe doing vendor comparisons, doing legal review, doing security checklists. Like, a lot of the purchasing process can be automated, even if it's not an autonomous system at the end of the day, signing a check without two people interacting.
That's fair. Is that because maybe there have been, with the help of AI, there's been many similar products in the market, and you kind of have to differentiate your product somehow, so the human component plays an even bigger part than they used to, and that encourages a lot of handshaking.
So much right now is about trust.
Okay.
And AI is still extremely scary to a lot of people. And this was a big challenge we had at OpenAI, because people inherently distrusted us. And I'd say, we don't train on your data. I had a slide just at the top really big. We do not train on your data. And they say, I don't believe you. And I'm like, well, it's in the contract. I can show you our architectural diagrams. And it didn't, I could talk till I was blue in the face. They're just like, I don't trust AI. And I don't trust your company. And I'm just nervous about this. So everyone is sort of seeking reassurance and authenticity and trust right now. And I think that is a very critical part of the sales cycle that we can't outsource, we can't automate. You have to look someone in the eye, and you have to be able to say, do you have reference customers I can talk to? And, do you have examples of companies like me that you've sold to? And can I see your security compliance framework? Because companies are just very nervous all around right now about AI.
How do you even do that? I feel like that'd be an extremely hard thing to do, to even convince someone that things are okay. Because even if you showed them everything, it's very hard to convey that. It's not like they'll read every line of code and be like, okay, like, this is safe. That sounds
the best way to do it is show them their peers are doing it.
Yeah, that's fair. Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, it's one thing I talk about a lot at OpenAI is something we did early on was we signed Morgan Stanley way before we had any business signing Morgan Stanley.
Wow.
And on the one hand, it took such an inordinate amount of our resources on legal, on security, on the sales engineering side. It took so much effort to get that deal done, get them implemented, and get them live. And so at the time, we kept being like, should we have done this? Was this a massive waste of resources? But in hindsight, it was the right thing to do, because for every other customer who said, can you work with a company like ours, we say, we work with Morgan Stanley. And they'd say, oh, that's good enough for me. And then, the Morgan Stanley champion, we put him on stage at every event we did. We made him a celebrity, and he became my ideal reference customer. I gave his name out all the time. He didn't, he was happy to play that role. And then they also forced us to become enterprise ready, as painful as it was. So I always, I tell people, because a lot of startup founders are like, okay, I've got an opportunity with Citibank, but I have to do these 8,000 things. And I'm like, be careful, because this will take over your engineering pipeline for a long time. This will take all of your resources. You'll spend millions of dollars on this deal. So A, charge a lot, charge way more than you think you should. And B, try to validate, is this a company that's going to get me a lot of other customers? If I can say I have this customer, and are they willing to be a champion and speak to other companies and be my reference?
That's such a good
It's
advice.
worth it, but you have to really weigh the ROI on that. It's not an easy decision.
And they also impact a lot on what you become, in a way. I don't know if this was like that in your case, but if they want it, you'll make it, and that kind of morphs you into almost like a slightly different company.
Yeah, you got to be really careful on the product side.
Right.
Like, don't let them drive your product roadmap, and make sure it stays like enterprise security roadmap only. And then validate. If they ask you for 30 enterprise features, go try to validate with other customers if that's useful, because every company has like 3 or 4 really strange, unique things they need built, and it's not worth investing really heavily in building those.
Do you fight with them when those time come? Like,
you have to say no a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, part of being in sales is saying no, and pushing back. I tell everybody that. I'm like, no easy yeses. No matter what you're asked for, never say yes. I always tell my salespeople that.
Yes.
Even if you can give it away, just pretend you can't, and then ask for something in return to get it. So that's just a big part of being in sales is like not just giving away everything that your customer asks you to.
Wait, that second to last line was really good, actually. What's the just say no, and then if they ask for it?
So let's say you're negotiating with someone, and you're at the end of the negotiation. You have $1 million contract, and they say, hey, one more thing, can I get net 60 instead of net 30? Can I pay you in 6 days and 30? Even if you know you can do it, just say, I don't know, man, that's gonna be hard.
And then
Can you
ask for-
can you sign by 5 p.m.? You know, whatever it is you need, and that's like a
really
big
good.
negotiation
I
technique,
wanna
and
write
and
that
you
down.
that applies to every step of the process, right? Can I get a demo? I don't know. Who's signing this contract? Can they come to the demo, right? So that's just it's called give get in sales. It's a really powerful tool to get what you want in the sales cycle. Sorry, I'm going to like sales 101 here. I don't know how relevant that is.
I'm going to write that down. Sorry, guys.
Give get, best sales tactic.
Give me 1 second. I got to look it up later. I should know this. Okay. So I guess that's sales. But do you have like a take on other positions of how the job itself changed or how it could change? You know, how marketing could change, how like engineering is like a huge one.
Yeah.
Do you have a take on what's going to change, what's going to stay the same?
I mean, I think every job that, you know, where you're an information worker, you know, I think every job is going to change pretty dramatically. And yeah, there's some that are going to change more than others, like engineering, any job that involves writing. I think those are going to be impacted very heavily. I think the people who will excel the most in this paradigm shift are those who know how to use the tools and know how to use AI and can make themselves more relevant. But there are definitely going to be some areas that it's like the job gets more and more automated. And ultimately I'm an AI optimist, and I think that this will create a lot of jobs that are hard to see today. As one example, if you can use AI to really speed up the drug discovery process, we can get way more drugs to market, which creates a lot of jobs around drug distribution and drug testing and approval, and also hopefully can improve the health outcomes for all of mankind. And there's a lot of great outcomes like that. But along the way, there are going to be some jobs that I think also get heavily automated.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I was just like, what kind of new jobs would get created, you think? Because I mean, this is just like future telling.
Yeah,
so it's really
it's hard for me
to.
We're already seeing a lot of jobs around data centers, right? We're building tons and tons of data centers
really
and
good
infra,
one.
and this is hiring like a whole new level of expertise. Like you need specialized cement poured in these centers, and you need people who know how to do the cooling, and you're getting all these sort of like specialized jobs created in like all over the U.S., not just in San Francisco. And it's hard for me to know. Like, you look back in the 90s and you're like, is the internet going to kill all the jobs? And the answer is no. It created a lot of jobs, but it was probably really hard for us to grok that in the 90s. So I don't know. It's hard to say what the future will look like. But I'm very optimistic that there are going to be a lot of new jobs that we can't even get our heads around today.
Thank you. Before we go to Q&A, I just have 2 or 3 more questions that I really want to ask, so bear with me. Speaking of new jobs, one new job is like an AI solution consultant. That's something we've never heard before. I mean, there is obviously solution consultants, but people who do AI in particular. And as an ex-consultant, I'm really curious. Do you have a take on, selling AI as a product or selling AI as like a big consulting project? Obviously, enterprise projects tend to be big and profitable. I mean, Accenture basically became a massive company doing just that.
Yeah.
I guess there's a beauty in building a product that everyone can use, and there's a beauty in having almost zero distribution costs, and there's a beauty in, or not distribution costs, scale. Yeah. Do you have a take on this product versus consulting projects?
Yeah, I mean, as I alluded to before, I think we've really over-indexed on the services side so far. Like the way most AI is deployed right now, it's extremely manual. So you have this whole ecosystem of forward deployed engineers, which basically are consultants going into companies and manually recreating their processes with AI. And to me, that just feels like a very slow, painful, tedious way to deploy AI to the entire workforce. So I personally get much more excited about the apps that are easy to deploy. I think as a seller, it's a lot more interesting to sell them. I think as a buyer, you're going to get a much quicker and more successful outcome that way. I've worked for companies where we mostly do services, and it is hard. It never ends.
Right.
It's like once you've implement and deploy, then things break, and there's new processes, and there's new people to train, and it becomes like a constant thing you have to invest in versus, if you have an application that works out of the box, you have something like Cursor, people can just figure it out and use it. There's no like implementation cost or work or constant updating. The company manages it for you. So I tend to be much more enthusiastic about the application side of it versus the services side. But I know that's me, and that's my hot take on this.
Yeah. Why is that a thing? You think like why? It almost seems like there's products for anything, like AI products for this, AI products for that. But why do you think there's just a whole industry around the idea of just creating everything from scratch, pay a ton of money for it?
I mean, because it's obvious, because you have all these, CEOs of every single phone call I had at OpenAI when something like, hi, I'm the CIO of Clorox, I'm just making up a random company, and I have these crazy ideas in my head about how I can use AI to build better products and get more customers and manage my support process and 20 other things. And I'd say, well, that's great. Here's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm like, I can't build these things for you. Like, we don't have the in-house forward deployed engineering team to build this stuff for you. But then that's when Accenture says, I can do it.
Right.
Whether or not they can. And so it's very tempting right now. Like, all these companies have really big AI budgets. The application ecosystem is still so young and new and doesn't have all the enterprise compliance software they need or certifications they need yet. They're scared of them. The big companies like OpenAI and even like Microsoft isn't quite even there yet either. So it's filling the gap, or the Accentures of the world who are like, just pay us and we'll do it for you. And then it's also tempting because what I talked about earlier, where every company is like, but my data is precious and I want it fine-tuned on my data and I want it unique for me. So you have all these consultants reinventing the wheel, charging a ton for all these companies to build products that are probably all just going to be broken and replaced by the app layer. That's my hot take here.
If there's anyone in the services industry, sorry. Also, a couple of you are standing. If there's not enough chairs, feel free to grab chairs from the back. Sorry about that. I didn't realize. It's really dark. One last question from my end. Thank you so much. Model capabilities changing day by day. How does that impact what you sell and the story that you have to tell them in a way? Because they might say, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do that?" And like one day you couldn't do it, and next you can, or maybe there's a better thing elsewhere. I feel like the AI capability is evolving faster than we can change our stories that we tell ourselves and other people. How do you manage that?
I think one of the hardest things in working in AI right now, in whichever company you're working for in any capacity, is everyone not working in AI assumes that you understand everything. You're on top of every news item that comes out that morning. You saw everything on Twitter, every feature, and it is so much. And that was one thing we really struggled with, was you walk into a meeting and the first question is something you've never heard of because it happened 5 hours ago and you're too busy working and not reading Twitter. And it was really challenging, especially at OpenAI. Everyone assumes you are the ambassador of OpenAI. You definitely saw Sam Altman's interview last night and have lots of opinions about it. It was really, really challenging. So we actually ended up hiring someone whose job was every morning in Slack for the sales team to post, here's everything you need to know today. And here's like, awesome. If you get asked about this, here's the answer. If you get asked about this, here's the answer. Which was really tough to like pull all that together. And it was helpful, and still sometimes it wasn't enough because you'd like give the answer they were given and then you get a follow-up question. You're like, oh my God, I really don't know what I'm talking about here. But yeah, it's really tricky. It's funny, I was chatting with the CEO of Cursor about this problem. I'm like, you're not just enabling your sales team on Cursor, you're enabling your sales team on AI and the impact on the world. Some of the questions you asked me today about the job market, I would get these in sales meetings. Like, is this going to take my job? What should my children be studying in school? And as a sales rep at these companies, you have to know these answers, which is wild. So I tell everyone, like, working in AI and starting to interface with people not working in AI, you are an ambassador of the entire paradigm shift of the entire ecosystem, and you have to be prepared for that as best you possibly can be.
Just one last final question. How much of that is like sales, obviously, and how much of that is like your personal take on AI? Well, you're a techno optimist. You've mentioned this before, so it's kind of similar. But like, okay, you know what? I guess this is kind of a weird question. But is there like anything about AI that you're not, I guess, particularly excited about? Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, you're going to make me end on a negative note?
Okay, yeah. This is a really weird question, sorry.
I mean, look, I will say I am eyes wide open, as is really anyone at these frontier labs, because you end up talking about this stuff a lot, like misinformation, lack of trust in institutions, joblessness. There are potentially a lot of harms of AI, and I think we probably spend way more time at OpenAI talking about this stuff than anyone expects we would. And, you know, even in an interview process, I asked every single person, what does AI safety mean to you? What is the worst thing you think could happen with AI? Just because I wanted to make sure people were coming into this thoughtfully. You know, and there were hard moments working at OpenAI. Like, we had protesters blocking our entrance some days.
Wow.
And when ChatGPT was first launched, I go to dinner parties and get, you know, my ass handed to me. People would just be like, you are destroying the world. And you have to be, ready for that working in AI, because you're going to get some of it. So we really made sure people came into this eyes wide open about what they were stepping into, and talk a ton about the potential societal risks. So I'm not wearing 100% rose-colored glasses on this.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, sorry. We'd love to get questions from the audience. If anyone wants to go first. Oh, there's a couple. Sorry. I think you had the. We're gonna give you a mic. So give us 1 second. I think they all work. All right. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alia. Thank you so much. So I guess the sense I was getting from you is that at OpenAI, you really built like a lot of consumer presence first, and then you were kind of catching up with enterprise motion and really like chasing after that. How do you think about that approach? You know, if you, I know maybe at OpenAI it wasn't fully intentional, but how do you think about that approach versus starting more intentionally with the enterprise motion and really focusing on that before you have like consumer pull?
I would say in general, I love sort of PLG products where you're creating you could call it a consumer product. You're basically creating a free version of your product that people use probably for work, and then there's a natural upgrade path. And then eventually what happens along that journey is enterprises start asking you for enterprise agreements, and they start asking you for bigger and bigger deals. That flow, I think, is a very defensible one, and it lets you get a lot of data on the actual product fit and building a really great product that people love before you start investing a ton in the expensive enterprise compliance features that you'll need later.
Yeah, I think he was.
All right. I'm interested in to learn more about when you talked about the tension of running enterprise at a consumer, like what's fundamentally a consumer company. So you gave the anecdote about you got this incredible customer insight, went to the research department, research built a solution for you. Could you talk more about like how OpenAI was organized to enable your sales motion, or maybe how it wasn't organized?
It mostly was not organized. Funny thing that happened actually is I could not get engineers to work on our product. They kept getting poached by the rest of the company. Like, I'd go hire a bunch of enterprise engineers, and they'd be like, I'm sorry, I just got poached into model behavior, because that's a lot more interesting than building your SOC 2 Type 2 compliance. And so we actually ended up ring fencing. We literally opened an office in Seattle and geolocated them away from the rest of the company so that they'd stop getting poached. And that was the only way I could get engineers to work on the enterprise feature. So it was really tough, and it continues to be, just because if you're sitting there doing the math and you're like, okay, I could build a feature that impacts 800 million users, or a feature that impacts, our much smaller enterprise base, I'm going to do the one that impacts consumer. And And so it's really hard to justify the enterprise investment, and that was a continual struggle.
Hi, thanks for your time. I'm curious to get your take on partnerships. OpenAI is famously partnering with lots of infrastructure companies, whether it's chips or cloud. But from a go-to-market perspective, from your kind of corner of the business, how do you see AI changing partnerships, whether it's channel go-to-market or whether it's solution integration with other people? Because that's always been a big part of tech in the last 20 years. I'm curious your take. Do you see AI changing the go-to-market partnership model in any way?
I mean, I think the fact that OpenAI has an API sort of enables the platform play already. Companies are building on top of the API, and you could argue that as a form of ISV partnership. The channel will be interesting. I'd say OpenAI still has a lot of opportunity on the channel. They haven't really gone that deep there yet. We dipped our toes into explorations with like Accenture and PwC and some of the bigger consultancies, but nothing really took off or hasn't taken off yet. So I would say we're still early there, and there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm not sure how AI is going to impact it.
Hi, Aliisa. Thank you for your time. I'd love to hear how you philosophically think about sales leadership. What is it, what it isn't, and what you look for if you were to hire a sales leader yourself.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I care a lot about curiosity, humility, adaptability, and an excellent track record in running sales teams. I think what's really interesting right now in this moment is sales is almost like a bit of a dirty word, and people are very, very fixated on technical skills. And you see companies like Clay is now calling their salespeople go-to-market engineers. It's a very weird moment where everyone is really, I think, over-indexed on technical capability. I honestly think a sales leader does not need to be technical, and I know that sounds crazy, but a good salesperson understands the value that they're selling to the customer. They understand the customer's problems. They understand how to make that customer look good. They understand what they need. And if they have technical questions, you bump that over to your sales engineer who can talk to their junior person. And so I think that just gets like very over indexed upon right now. I think great sales leaders are curious. They're good listeners. They understand their customers. They understand how to match value to it. They understand how to hire great salespeople. They have salespeople follow them from job to job. That's my favorite question to ask a leader: is who has followed you and who would follow you here? It's just a really great indicator that they're a strong manager and a strong leader.
Thanks again for coming out and giving this talk. I just wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about your email inbox filling up with AI-generated emails that are very easy to send out now. Do you see sort of the rise of people dealing with that signal-to-noise ratio by having AI read through their email, and sort of an arms race there, maybe of people trying to advertise knowing an AI is the recipient of the advertisement in maybe multiple spaces?
I hadn't thought about that, but I think that's probably exactly right. I think we'll end up with AI readers that just summarize all of our inbox and take action for us. That sounds like a great business idea.
Hi, Lisa. I just am amazed that you were able to keep up with that growth, and I'm curious how, because it sounds like you were just like trying to just respond to calls. First question, how did you hire fast enough? Like, how did you do that? Because you probably have the fastest growth trajectory of anyone I know. And then secondly, now is it shifting at all? So one thing that I'm seeing at a board level is that people want to see the ROI payout. And so I'm wondering if people are looking for productivity or ROI in the sales.
Yeah, I'll tell you the mistake I made immediately is I just tried to hero mode and do everything at the same time and send out customer contracts and do the whole cycle. It also took me a little while to actually we were just all everyone was so shaken and everything was so broken at OpenAI. Like, it's hard to describe, like, our entire, everything, all the engineers were getting paged all night long, and nobody had any bandwidth for anything. So it took me about 3 months to actually get headcount, which was a really tough 3 months. And then I finally, got our COO, Brad, was like, Aliisa, just go hire whoever you need to hire, and then I could go sprint at it. But yeah, the mistake I made early was focusing too much on just trying to get out of the pit I was in and not fight harder to just get as much headcount as I could as early as possible. So don't hero mode is probably my big lesson there. a really tough few months. Once I did get a lot of headcount, the network effect for me was referrals. So, basically came up with a list of all the companies I wanted to hire from. I went to all those companies and asked around, like, who's the top rep, hired that person, and as soon as they came in, would say, who are the top, your other top 3 best people at your company, and hire them. And I hired really heavily through referrals. I tried really hard to use that as my shortcut, sort of my cheat system to not have to interview 100 people for every person we hired, and that helped, and that really expedited. And it got harder as we started to move into Tokyo and Singapore and London and networks or markets where I didn't have a huge network. That got harder and harder. But in the beginning, we were largely depending on referrals. And sorry, your second question. 100% agree with you. This was so interesting to watch in the beginning. People are like, I just want to buy OpenAI. I don't even care what I'm buying. To like, I need to see ROI and productivity gains, which is really tough. And then also, how do you, once you say, okay, well, we saved your employees 3 hours a day, they're like, well, how can you prove they're not just going to the gym? I mean, we can't, So yeah, it's really tough figuring out how to show how productivity gains translate into money saved or better product shipped or whatever their core metric is. Productivity is a hard thing to sell.
Maybe like one or two more.
I'm not sure if you can see me. OpenAI does have an FDE program now, right? And I'd assume that when you're doing the contract, you're probably allocating some FDEs at the start of the contract. How does that, sorry, I'll stand up so you can see me. So, if you have FDEs, how does that impact, I don't know, your pricing, or does it also have an impact on your sales strategy?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
OpenAI has FDE program, and I would assume that, you're going
An
to...
FE program?
FDE.
FDE.
Yeah.
Oh, for deployed engineer.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah. So, just the question around that, right? So, you're probably allocating some FDEs at the start of the contract. Given that you talked about pricing, does that have an impact on your pricing strategy? Also, I don't know, overall impact on sales.
Yeah, so we only deploy FDEs on the biggest deals. It's the most expensive resource we have, and in a company where everybody is just working insane hours and we don't have enough people and the laws of gravity mean we can't hire fast enough, then we are really, really careful about where we deploy FDEs. So when I left a few months ago, the barometer was basically like it had to be a $10 million deal or more to get an FDE. So we just use that as a super high bar. And I think that makes sense for companies because, your employees are an extraordinarily expensive resource to give out.
Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. Well, please give a round of applause to Aliisa for a great panel. Thank you so much, Aliisa.
Thank you. Oh, and I'll just say, because I'm sure I'm going to ask this a lot, I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn. It's Aliisa. I'm the only one. I'm caught up with my inbox, and I do a pretty good job of getting back. So if you want to reach out to me, that is the easiest way to do it.
All right. Wow, that's really generous. Thank you. Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I actually have just accepted an offer. I'm going to join a venture capital fund, going to the dark side, yes, and I start in about a month. So if you have great startup ideas, come find me in a month.